It's springtime, and so naturally, people's thoughts are turning to marriage. Mae West, with whom I'm often compared, is fond of saying that marriage is a great institution, but I'm not sure I'm ready for an institution just yet. The question this spring, actually, though, is whether a great institution, the United States Supreme Court, is ready for marriage. You all will remember the case of Loving against Virginia, perhaps the winner of the competition for the best name ever for a Supreme Court case. In that case, Chief Justice Warren wrote for a unanimous Supreme Court that Virginia's ban on interracial marriage violated the Constitution, in part because the freedom to marry with which it interfered has long been recognized as one of the vital personal rights essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. And I'd say free women, too. So now we are waiting on tenterhooks, in a sense, to see what the Supreme Court is going to do about two marriage cases in front of it. The Hollingsworth against Perry case, which is a challenge to California's reinstitution of marriage inequality after a decision by the California Supreme Court holding that California has to allow all couples to marry. And the second case, United States against Windsor, a case in which I've been involved, which involves the constitutionality of a federal statute, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is surely a winner in the competition for the most misleading name for a federal statute ever. It will be very interesting to see what Justice Scalia, whom Nan mentioned earlier, as saying nobody could ever vote against the Voting Rights Act because it sounded so good, so that made the Voting Rights Act suspect, does about the Defense of Marriage Act, because who could vote against a defense of marriage? I'm still trying to figure out what the act is defending marriage against, and I haven't yet done that. But while we're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule, I think it's important for us to recognize something else, which is that it takes much more than a celebrated judicial decision to realize our constitutional values. Loving was the end of a sustained assault on racial discrimination, and almost all of the troops in that campaign were not Supreme Court justices. They were ordinary Americans who were extraordinary Americans. People like Robert Moses and Fannie Lou Hamer, like John Lewis and Viola Liuzzo, and like Mildred and Richard Loving. Loving didn't create change in American hearts and minds. It reflected change that was already there. Now, in the past quarter century, we've moved from the era of Bowers against Hardwick, a case in which the Chief Justice of the United States felt free to compare the sexual intimacy of gay people to murder, and not in a complimentary way, to an era in which a majority of Americans support legal recognition for gay families. We've moved in roughly a generation from a nation in which no state provided legal recognition to same-sex couples to one in which 2 in 5 Americans live in states that do. And without that change on the ground, the Supreme Court would not even be considering protections for same-sex couples. Now, how did that change occur? Well, after we were at the Supreme Court to argue United States against Windsor this year, we came down the steps of the court, and I hope for all of you who are lawyers, you get the opportunity one day to come out of the Supreme Court with your client and have hundreds of people screaming your client's name. It's an experience like no other. But when we came down the steps and we had the little press conference afterwards, somebody asked Edie Windsor at the press conference, what made the change? Why are things so different today? And what Edie said is, it's because we came out. It's because we came out. We moved, as Donald Rumsfeld would put it, from being unknown knowns, that is, the ones they don't know, to being known knowns, that is, people who know that they know gay people. And they know gay people, and they respect gay people, they value gay people, and they love gay people. Now, you all know there's an old joke about a conservative is a liberal who's just been mugged, and a liberal is a conservative who's just been arrested. Well, today's version is a supporter of marriage equality as a politician who just discovered his kid is gay. So what are we waiting for? Well, in the words of another old joke that many of you have heard, this couple, they've been married for 60 years. They go to see their lawyer and they say, we want a divorce. We've been married for 60 years. And the lawyer says to the couple, you've been married for 60 years. Well, we've never gotten along. But you've been together the whole 60 years. Yeah, but we just hate each other. So why now? And they said, well, we've been waiting for the kids to die. And I think the generational change in America shows us that in some sense we're just waiting for a generation to die or to change its minds. So there's a wonderful poem by Marge Percy that I thought about when I was asked to speak today, and it's called The Low Road. It begins by asking, what can they do to you? And initially, the answers are pretty depressing. Although alone you can fight, the message is alone you can't win. But then the poem builds, and I want to end my introductory remarks by reading you the end of the poem, because I think it captures so powerfully why we're here today. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake-dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people, don't worry, they can't give sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four people, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity in your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. That building tide is what we're here to celebrate today. And now it's time to present the annual Alliance for Justice Champion of Justice Award. This year, there actually are 4 champions of justice because we're honoring 4 statewide coalitions that successfully fought for equality in the 2012 elections. It's one of the great stories of electoral success in recent years. These groups from Maine, from Washington, from Minnesota, and Maryland have completely changed the national conversation about same-sex marriage, and they're moving us forward faster than we could possibly have imagined. They have an amazing story to tell, and they have lessons to share. And the Alliance is proud to celebrate their achievements today. They demonstrate a principle that's at the heart of the Alliance's Bolder Advocacy Initiative, that lasting change is possible when fearless nonprofit organizations join together with energized citizens and with courageous public officials. The fact that several more states have legalized same-sex marriage since the election, including Minnesota itself, of course, is proof of the momentum that these campaigns have provided. And now we turn to Minnesotans United, which has a very special place on today's program because they didn't just win one victory, they won 2. In the space of 7 months. In November, they helped Minnesota become the first state to successfully defeat a constitutional amendment enforcing a mini-DOMA. And now they've just claimed victory in the state legislature. 2 weeks ago, Minnesota became the 12th state, plus the District of Columbia, to legalize same-sex marriage. So congratulations. Now, how did they do it? Well, they did it with messages like these.
When I was elected bishop, gay couples started wanting marriage, and I said I would rather not deal with that.
And then we were invited to this meeting. When we came into the living room, here were about 25 gay men. We just asked them, what do you want from the church? They said, we just want to be accepted like everyone else.
These brothers and sisters in Christ deserve my full support. That's why we're voting no.
I joined the military because I love this country, and I went to Iraq. I was in an incident, I nearly died. I remember laying there, looking down and seeing my legs mangled. I thought about my family. Corporal Andrew Wilford, he gave his life in Afghanistan protecting our freedoms. He was gay. I cannot look at this picture and say, Corporal, you were good enough to fight for your country and give your life, but you were not good enough to marry the person you love. I'm pleading with you to vote no.
And now to present the Champion of Justice Award to Minnesotans United, please welcome one of the most important progressive voices in the United States Senate and a great advocate for justice and equality, our very good friend, Senator Al Franken.
What an honor to be introduced by Pam Karlan. Pam used to be a guest on my radio show regularly, and so when I got to the Judiciary Committee, I knew something. As senator, one of the best parts of my job is recognizing and congratulating Minnesotans for their accomplishments, and since last November, we've had a lot to be proud of. On November 6th, 2012, our state became the first in the nation to defeat an anti-marriage constitutional amendment at the ballot box. On May 9th of this year, the Minnesota House of Representatives passed a marriage equality bill. On May 13th, the Senate followed, and last week, on Tuesday, May 14th, Governor Mark Dayton signed that bill into law, making Minnesota the 12th state in the union with marriage equality. And the first state in the Midwest to pass equality through our legislature. So many people, so many individuals are responsible for getting us to where we are today. There was, of course, Senator Scott Dibble and Representative Karen Clark, who carried these bills in our legislature. There's Monica Meyer of Outfront, Minnesota, and Ann Kaner Roth of Project 515, who created Minnesotans United. And at the center of it all was Richard Carlbom, who served as campaign manager for Minnesota United. There was a profile today of Richard that I read. Where was it? Was it in the Strip? Where was it? Oh, NPR, that's right. It was NPR radio that called him quiet. What? I was at so many house parties. This guy was not just the campaign manager, he was the voice of this, of the opposition to the constitutional amendment, and has been also the voice for the marriage equality bill that passed through our legislature. And I went to so many house parties, so many rallies where he was the voice. And this man led this fight, and he led it successfully. I often compare our fight for marriage equality today to the fight of the civil rights movement of the 60s. Back then, the state of Virginia, as you know, in Loving versus Virginia, they had prosecuted a biracial couple, Mildred and Richard Loving, because they got married. In the Supreme Court, the Lovings won 9-0. Richard didn't win 9-0. He won 52.6 to 47.4. And no, he didn't start there. He won in the state Senate 37-30, and the House of Representatives 75-59. The work that you do, Richard, makes sure that the Lovings and Loving keep on winning. Your work will help so many Minnesotans start families knowing that at least their government won't treat them like second-class citizens. Your work will also help LGBT people across the country, because the Supreme Court is writing its decision on DOMA right now, And every new state with marriage equality is one more argument for loving, one more argument for ending DOMA once and for all. I got to tell you, I was there, I was in the state, I saw this guy. This wouldn't have happened without Richard. Richard, congratulations for this award. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all your great work. Richard Carlbom, come on up. I'm not sure if this is yours. Oh, it is, it is. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Senator Franken and the Alliance for Justice for this award, to Minnesotans United for All Families, and the broad and very amazing coalition that was built. I want to say something about Senator Franken right away, and that is this guy is the first statewide elected official to run unabashedly in support of the freedom to marry. In 2008, when he was launching his campaign, he was asked a question about it, and while other candidates hemmed and hawed within the Democratic process, party process to choose our nominee, he was absolutely upfront, and he said, why in the world would I ever deny somebody the freedom to marry the person they love, because his wife, Franny, is the most amazing person, and he knows Minnesotans love her. And that was in 2008. I said it before, and I'll continue to say it through your election next year, and that is, here's a guy who actually, you know, Wayne Gretzky never skated to the puck, he skated to where the puck is going to be. And on this issue of equality, Senator Franken has been skating to where the issue will be, and he led the way, so thank you for that. So Minnesotans United for All Families was formed minutes after the legislature in 2011 passed a constitutional amendment, proposed a constitutional amendment that would ban the freedom to marry in the state's constitution. It was formed, the coalition was formed by our two statewide LGBT organizations, Outfront Minnesota and Project 515, and then with our national partners, the Human Rights Campaign, Freedom to Marry, and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. Those five yes, please. They deserve a huge round of applause. Those five organizations enabled Minnesotans to empower themselves to actually change the course of history. And I want to just share with you a quote. Throughout the campaign, we had several different events, house parties, over 1,000 house parties. And one of the people who stepped forward was a business leader named Marilyn Carlson Nelson, chairman of the Carlson Companies. And she shared a poem at church one Sunday when she invited me, she was speaking, and I want to share that poem with you today. It's by Edwin Markham. It goes, he drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a bigger circle and drew him in. In 2011 and 2012, the experience I think we had in Minnesota was that thousands of people empowered themselves to redraw the circle. Thousands of people showed up to do phone banking and go door knocking and to spark conversations. And the topic of conversation was, why does marriage matter? These conversations that would be sometimes as long as 20 to 25 minutes with each voter was about engaging them and asking them to actually engage in a deep and authentic conversation about why marriage matters. One of the things Garrison Keillor says about Minnesota is that an extroverted Minnesotan is a Lutheran who looks at somebody else's shoes and not their own. And here we are in a state trying to actually encourage people to talk about love, commitment, responsibility. The good news is when you ask people why they got married, they light up. And they want to talk all about it. They want to tell you where they met, where they fell in love, how one asked the other, what their kids are doing, what their kids aren't doing, and they're very disappointed. It's amazing the kind of stuff that people will engage you in. And then when you share your authentic self with them and you explain to them that I met Justin 6 years ago in St. Peter, Minnesota, playing trivia. And it'll be 6 years in June, next month. And I fell in love. He's the love of my life. And the one thing I want to do is be able to protect what we have, to uphold it. And we don't want to get married because his family is not supportive and we want to push the issue into their face, but rather we want to get married because my family says that's a tradition and they're expecting it. From my grandmother who calls him at Christmas to say you should be home with your family, to my 5-year-old nephew who insists that December is too long to wait for the next wedding in the family. Our family is excited to uphold us in that, and the thousands of people who empowered themselves to redraw the circle really are going to change lives in a very meaningful way. So this is all the credit to the thousands and thousands of Minnesotans who showed up to Phone Bank, who made a contribution, put a bumper sticker on their car or a lawn sign in their yard. So thank you so much to the Alliance for Justice, and we got it done in Minnesota.